All right. So, Amber, from what I understand about you, and I didn't know this about you, you're a doomsday gal. You
I
think that
am.
doomsday can happen, and you prep for these things.
Yes, anytime you have to always be prepared.
I agree, but tell me more. Where does this
Yeah.
come from? Did you watch a bad movie as a kid?
Oh man, a little bit of that, but I'm definitely a prepper, and it's not like the casual. I have some extra water bottles around. I mean,
That's what I
like
was going to
I'm
say.
a
Toilet paper, water bottles seem normal, but
full, full doomsday prepper. Like I have the like go bags is what we call them, like packed for everybody in the family.
I had one of these when I had each of my daughters.
Yes,
The
yes.
bag you
Well,
bring.
I'm sure my kids are probably the only kids that have like evacuation drills like once a month to know where their go bags are and get ready to go. They probably think it's normal, but it is what it is. I do the full thing. I have the like water purification straws,
Okay.
I have the food that's saved. Like my husband Quentin, he'll go and look in a closet and he's like, "This says 3 months worth of food on this box," and I'm like, don't ask questions.
No, it's
Just like just let it go. And I think at this point he's used to it, and he just kind of goes with the flow. But he doesn't even argue about it anymore. So that's just my personality. I'm a big doomsday prepper. I even started a garden because of it, which by the way, I have grown to love so much. So it's not just, a source of food
it's
now.
become probably a
It's
hobby too. Yeah.
yeah, I love it. But it all started from me just trying to prepare.
Well, Amber, first of all, thank you for sharing. That is hilarious. And to all listeners out there, hey, if something happens in this world, Amber Allen is the person you call. She's got you covered with her go bags, that's for sure. Let's be honest. Life's messy. Decisions are complex. And it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to the tension. Let's get into it. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Tension Podcast, where we talk about things that unfortunately we will never solve in our life. They are tensions that we're going to continue to have to learn how to manage. And so we bring on guests for you to talk about tensions that they're vulnerably going to share how they're dealing with it, knowing that in the end, they don't have any solves for you. They've got practical tips on how to manage it. And I'm super excited today is about the tension of representation. We have Amber Allen, who's the SVP of just about everything in anything business I'm involved in. So I won't even give it a description. She does it all, Swiss Army knife. So much of business, Amber, as you know, I wouldn't even have or be able to do or do efficiently or effectively if you didn't do the myriad of things you do. So, first and foremost, thanks for being on. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, we are too. So, I mean, I always want to start with what is the tension? What are we going to talk about? And this idea of the tension of representation, I think this is going to be a really fun one
Yeah.
because I think it's one of those that we are talking about something that needs to be talked about. And not a lot of people seem to talk about them, especially in our industry. And that is this, okay, tension of representation, meaning this industry, financial services, for those listeners that don't know, is dominated by white males, people that look like me. And so we don't think of any tension of I'm representing some other part of my life, of my community, of people that look like me, because me, I'm like, well, this is the industry is just like me. And so many are. And yet you feel this level of representation tension where it's like, Amber Allen, the professional, go crush it, be amazing like you are. And there's this entire unit as a black female that you're like, and they're kind of all I'm representing them with every move I make.
Yeah.
That's a lot, Amber.
It's a lot. It can be a lot. Yeah, the tension of representation is really, like you said, it's the weight of being the minority or sometimes like the only one in a room.
Yeah.
And there's honestly a lot that comes with that. It's like the pressure of not just representing yourself, so me, Amber Allen, but me as a black woman and everybody who looks like me.
Yeah.
It's like mental energy that you don't think about, that you have to spend just like calibrating how you show up in rooms, because you don't want to disappoint, right? You're representing everyone
So
that
many other
looks like
people,
you.
right?
Yeah, and that can be a bit of a burden. And it can be very heavy sometimes.
Yeah.
So, you think about things like, your tone, your words, how does your hair look? What is your presence? You just
Mm,
want to make sure that you fit in so that you don't disappear, but you also like want to make sure that you're seen, but not too seen. So
yeah.
it's just this tension of
That's attention.
constantly, yeah, holding two things at once, to be honest.
Yeah, Amber. I mean, first of all, I mean, yes, listener out there, this is, I mean, this is an amazing conversation as you go through it. You may not be a black female, but you may be representing another group of people, or you may think about this like, well, actually, I haven't been thinking of representation the way I should. I've just been thinking about me, and maybe that makes you more unselfish and think about so many other things. Wherever you take this, I think this is going to be just tons of learning for both me and you, listener out there. But Amber, I mean, I have to imagine there is, yes, the extra burden, right? Every
Yeah,
meeting you're on, you have a whole nother side of your brain having to go,
yeah.
how is this? How is that? Like, do you ever get to the place where you kind of are like, it feels like in some ways you're almost unfairly judged because you are representing?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would say that happens. You want to be authentically yourself,
Yeah.
but you're also very aware that you're different and you're perceived differently than everyone else in the room. And sometimes you just want to do your job, and you just carry this
Just do
invisible
your job as
weight.
Amber Allen.
It
That's it.
is me, like, but there's this invisible weight. And to be honest with you, Travis, it's a weight that no one asks you to really carry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people around you don't even know that you are carrying it. And so, when I think through the tension, I think of how I've grown when I first, saw it to where I am now.
Yeah.
Because again, you carry this invisible burden that no one is really asking you to carry, but there are some, personal struggles and growth that you have to focus on there too.
Well, I'm glad you're going there. That's exactly where I want to go. So, as always, you want to go through our 4 steps of managing attention. And the first of those steps is like you have to first say, I see it. Like, I see that this is a thing. And this could be for some of the people who have been on for different tensions. This go back to childhood. It could be the first time they were in a conference room. It could be whatever it is. But let's start with that first step, right? Like, when is the first time for you
Yeah.
felt like and we say like see it, right? But like you really noticed that this is actually a tension in the world, not just for Amber.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Here's the thing. I'd been navigating this tension for years, 15 plus
Yeah.
years, but I didn't have a name for it.
Okay.
Honestly, until this random
And like it was
conversation.
waiting, it was
Yeah.
weight on you, but you couldn't even really
Yep.
see. You just knew it was weighty.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And so I had a conversation with a colleague. I was in an Uber and we were headed to dinner. And her name is Christina. And she asked me, you know, did you go to summer camp as a kid?
Yeah.
And her daughter had just watched The Parent Trap. And she was
Okay.
so excited about camp, loved that movie too. And, the first thing that I said when she asked, did you go to summer camp? It's like, no, black people don't go to summer camp. And that's, some do, but that was like the first thing that I said. And so she started describing it, like the campfires and the friendship bracelets and, all these structured activities. And like I realized that my summers look nothing like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I instead was like watching my siblings and cousins staying at my grandmother's house, figuring out like how to entertain without a lot of structure or
Yeah.
resources. And neither way is really better or worse. They were just like completely different. And that's when it hit me. Like this is the tension. It's like that invisible gap between the experience and culture and that representation that honestly we never talk about, especially at work.
Oh my goodness, for sure.
Yeah, because here's the reality. Like you said, me working in financial services, wealth management is an industry that's, historically been dominated by older white males. And
Yes. Yes.
culturally, a lot of us, just had really different upbringings, my upbringing from theirs. And so the summer camp conversation was just like an example, but it shows up everywhere, to be honest. When I've had other conversations with colleagues about, how they spent their summers or the family connections that opened doors or
Right.
ski trips and things like that, I didn't have any of that. My path looked different. My references are different. The things that shaped me are different. And like I said, none of that is bad. But
Yeah.
when you're in rooms where everyone else shares a similar background and you don't, you start to like feel it and you start to notice it, even if nobody else says anything about it. So that's when I really realized, or when I thought back, I realized that that was the tension that I was facing. And so I naturally just started to adapt and,
Yeah.
do things like what you may have heard of, code switching. So that kind of became the norm for me.
Wait, explain that term.
Yeah, code switching. So code switching is when you adjust how you present yourself based on like where you are or who you're around. So it
Okay.
could be your language, your tone, your mannerisms, even
Yeah.
how you wear your hair or how you dress. And honestly, everyone does some version of it.
Sure.
But when you're in the minority in your environment, it becomes really constant.
Mm,
And it's not just at that point about adapting. It's sometimes like editing yourself to belong. And
interesting.
so I used to do that quite a bit in my earlier in my career.
Okay.
And it would take a mental toll because you're doing these mental gymnastics before you even walk into the office. And it was, 8 to 9 hours, honestly, of like performing. And
Yeah.
then I get back in my car at the end of the day and I just kind of breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh, I
I could
can
be me. I could be
finally,
me totally
I
again.
can be me and be myself again. And again, most people around me had no idea that I was doing like that mental gymnastics or that work. And it wasn't because they didn't care. It was just because it was invisible and they didn't know. And so when I had that Uber conversation with Christina, that was the first time that I really actually had a name for it and I can identify what that tension was.
Yeah.
And I had been carrying that for honestly almost like 15 to 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I? It's like totally off uh, from where I want to go, but I do want to ask the question.
Yeah.
You just said it's not as if the people you're around didn't care, right? And I think that that's important. But like,
Yeah.
do you have just a quick piece of wisdom for if someone is like, how do I be more sensitive to that? How do I
Yeah.
lean in and have a discussion about it? How do I like? I think Amber, that's one thing I'm curious to hear directly from your feedback. Like, what would actually be helpful for you in those moments back then, or even today,
Yeah.
when you do feel like you're having to play that chameleon? And yeah, I mean, I just imagine. I mean, I like somebody's kind of like breaks my heart that you've got to go into the car, and at least then when you were first like figuring out this tension,
Hmm.
like just like, oh, I don't have to act anymore. I don't have to like, what for the people that love you, that work with you, all those things, like, what is it if they don't look like you and can't identify with that representation burden?
Yeah.
What can they do to make you and others there around feel better? But like, what's appropriate, what's not, I guess is the
Yeah.
question.
No, that's a really good question. Some of my biggest allies and people that I've leaned on and supporters have been people who don't look like me at all, who
Mm,
don't have a similar background, and we don't have much in common in that way.
yeah.
Um, Early on, I think I assumed that only people who could really understand me were people that looked like me or had those shared experiences, but that really wasn't how it played out.
Oh, interesting.
The ones that advocated for me, they were honestly the ones that like sat back and listened. And
Mm,
it seems like very simple, but it's something about having someone actually listen and actually
come
see
on.
you for you. And those are the times and the people. that again were my biggest allies and would advocate for me. And so advocating for me when I wasn't in the room,
Yeah.
they paid attention, they asked questions, and then they like made space for me to be myself without making it weird.
Mm.
And sometimes and I think we have to, there's a part of this where we have to consider sensitivity. Sometimes people have questions or want to inquire or just are curious and are trying to learn, and they don't know how to ask the right questions. And so
Right.
sometimes it can be awkward, it can be clumsy, but I think that's where you have to understand what the intent is, because I've had plenty of people who I would, are really great people, ask me pretty blunt, direct questions, and it felt a little awkward and weird, but I knew that the intent,
Yeah, you knew.
yeah, exactly. And so we kind of laugh about it and then we talk, but it's really about just paying attention, asking questions, and showing up and seeing people and listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think it is so simple, but I do think most of the world, especially my goodness, America today, it seems like what you just said, boy, we need a lot more of that in general.
Yeah.
And people aren't well practiced in it, and they're afraid of the awkward. Or I do want to be sensitive, and I don't want there to be a wrong intent. And your message really is, hey, as long as you make your intent clear, it's literally just because you want to know so that you can care for me more. You can
Yep.
be as awkward as you want to, because
Yep.
that opens the dialogue, which changes the way in which you even feel, I would guess, the burden.
Yeah. And people aren't going to learn if they're unable to ask questions. So I
Mm,
want you to ask questions. I
yeah,
want to be able to tell you about, some of the culturally different things or how I grew up. And I want to tell you the good, the bad, and how I use it now. And I don't want to be judged for it. And, same thing if the shoe is on the other foot.
yeah,
Not everyone who is a white male or whoever, they grew up this luxury or lavish
right,
childhood. There's people who come from different backgrounds and have different struggles, and although they may not look the exact same,
yeah.
it's still a struggle. We're all human, and I think we just have to make sure that we're connecting on that human level a bit more.
Yeah, and I think in the end, if someone can maybe take their eyes off of themselves and notice the platform that they've uniquely been given, I do think everyone is representing something. So I love that we're talking about
Absolutely.
specifically what you feel like you're representing,
Absolutely.
because I think it's such it's not only a culturally relevant conversation right now, but I also think it's just an important piece of like, well, we can just talk about this for 45 minutes. Like I think it's important for everyone, but
Yeah.
I also am like, hey, everyone represents something, and if you're not managing this tension, it's probably because step one of four, you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
You're
Yep.
probably representing something. I don't know what that is. So I want to go back, because the second part of getting to that fourth piece of like actually managing the tension, when we're actually living in harmony in some ways with the tension of just almost at peace. So you saw it from a really awesome colleague that just talked to you about it. And
Hmm.
while, like you said, you're not going to generalize that there aren't as many Black people that go to a summer camp, that's
Yeah.
kind of true, you're saying.
Yeah.
And so for you, you're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And
Yeah. Exactly.
this is weighty that yet again,
Yeah.
I can't relate to you when you see Parent Trap and your little kid sees Parent Trap. There's like a connection there, and I'm just seeing it laughing, thinking
Yeah.
that is fun,
Like
but
this happens? Is
right,
this real? Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think the second piece, right? Once you can see it, notice it, you're like, okay, I can call it something. I like what you
Yeah.
said, like felt it for 15 years, seeing it for some months, for a year, right?
Yeah.
But the second idea of like, okay, now you have to sit in that.
Hmm.
This is actually a real tension, and you now have words to actually describe all of this kind of burden carrying chameleon, all of these
Yeah.
things that you've mentioned. How did it feel when you finally just got to like give it a name and then sit
Yeah.
with it? Was it kind of like sucky, or was it liberating,
You
or
know
what?
what? It's funny because once I recognized it, I actually started to see the tension like everywhere. And I
Okay.
realized how much friction it had been creating internally and externally.
Wow.
So,
In your life, you mean?
yes, in my
Yeah.
life. Yep. Um, early in my career, I put so much pressure on myself. I felt like, I couldn't be just great. I had to be perfect. Every mistake that I made felt magnified. Every
Mm,
success, I had to go and prove something bigger.
yeah.
And it's just, it was very tiring when you're the only one in the room and you're not just representing yourself, or at least that how it feels.
Yeah.
You're carrying the weight of how people might perceive everyone who is like you. And that's whether being a Black person. A lot of the times early on in my career, I was the only woman, and
Yeah. Okay.
so
That's
that was a
exactly
big
what I
one
was hoping
too.
you'd say, because it is the same in our industry, just as a female.
Yes. Yes, that was a big one. And then I also I was typically the youngest person in the room too. So I was the
Now
youngest
that's
person
the
in the
one I can
room.
understand. I get that one.
I was a woman, and then I was Black. And so I was like, oh man, this is a lot. And it can be a lot to hold on to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if no one knows that you're like struggling with it. So
Or,
there
can't
was
even relate.
exactly. And so there was this like this there's this loneliness, to be honest with you, not because like people were unkind and didn't care. A lot of my colleagues have been great, but
Yeah.
when you're navigating through something that people just don't experience or feel, then it can feel really isolating, even in a room full of people that support you.
Yeah.
You're laughing at like all the jokes, and you're contributing to the team meetings, you're doing your job, but then there's like this layer underneath that no one else is dealing with, and it's really hard to explain. So then you just end up carrying it really quietly.
Yeah.
um and so it took me a while to really learn. And this is a thing with early on in my career too. When people ask me questions about like my background, or if I
Yeah.
felt like singled out some way, I used to take it as a negative, like I was
Mm,
being put in the spotlight or othered or like put on display. But
yeah.
over time I realized not everyone asking those questions was asking like in a harmful way. And that
Mm,
goes back to what I was saying earlier. Sometimes people are genuinely just curious. They're trying to educate themselves. They never, had someone in like their close circle who could share, the perspective that I could share.
yeah.
And they were just really trying to understand and learn the only way that they knew how.
Yeah.
And so I had to learn like how to separate the intent from like the impact. And like I said, yes, sometimes it will land awkwardly, but awkward isn't the same thing as someone being malicious.
That's a
Um,
great quote, by the
yes,
way.
it's just they are just trying to understand. And so like that shift, that mindset set shift kind of changed a lot for me. Like, I stopped assuming the worst when people ask questions or, looked at me a certain
And can I
way.
I wanna I wanna I wanna
Mhm.
stop you just right there.
Yeah.
How did you stop assuming the worst? I mean, I struggle with that just genuinely, and generally, and so I'm curious just to learn from you in general, like, what happened in your mindset, or is it something that still pops up now and then? Like, how do you give the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah. I think two things. One was just natural growth over time. I'm talking about, over my entire career, so spanning 20 years. And so some of it was just growth. And as I grew and developed relationships, other relationships, with really close mentors and really close friends that I still have to this day that again
Yeah.
don't look like me, being able to talk to them openly and just being candid, that's when I kind of started to take a step back and look internally and say, okay, like maybe some of this is me. Maybe some of this is my own insecurities. Um, you know, maybe every time someone asks me a question about my background or my hair or something like that, they're not asking to be harmful. They don't
Yeah.
know, and they don't
It
have
doesn't
anyone
need
else
to
that they can
it doesn't
ask.
need to give a defense mechanism response.
Exactly. And I think that's where it really started, is really having honest conversations with some of the people that I had really meaningful relationships with.
Yeah.
Um, And again, they don't look like me and they were my strongest allies and they were transparent and honest with me. And so that's really when I started to kind of make that shift and just have a different mindset. Now,
Yeah.
I do want to say this. I want to be clear. It's not always all in someone's head. So, you know,
I was gonna say there's a reason why the
yes.
knee-jerk response
Yeah.
is defensive mechanism. It's not as if you just decided to be that way. There's
Yeah.
real reason, right? I mean,
Yes,
that's
there are. There are real systemic barriers in corporate America. There are structures and biases that keep minorities, whether you're black or whether you're a woman,
mm,
from advancing from higher roles, higher pay. Like that's not just paranoia. That's documented. That's real data. So when I talk about learning to separate like intent from impact or giving people grace when they are clumsy or awkward, I'm not saying that like the playing field is level and we're all just being too sensitive. It's not, and we're not. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that for me, I had to figure out what I could control.
that I was gonna
Um,
say that's
yeah,
yes.
and I couldn't change the system overnight, but I could be honest about what was external and what was internal
Mm,
and learn how to deal with both.
mm. That is so much wisdom. And thank you. Yeah, because I do think it's important. Yeah, that we don't just make it all. Yes, I think one of the things that we're trying to do with this podcast is just talk about tensions that all of us deal with, but it's to say that like they're tensions for a reason,
Yeah,
and we do want to take the high road when we can because you
yeah,
do control certain aspects of how you view things, even if certain things aren't fair, even if
yep,
things are like really actually true that you should react this way or do this way. You do still have a choice. And I think that's one of the things that like managing a tension, any tension is all about is like the
yeah,
choice that we all still have. Right. And so, gosh, I mean, Amber, it's interesting, like going through, okay, you saw it for now just maybe some months or a year, but you felt it for so long. Now that you saw it, it pops up everywhere. And I think what kind of breaks my heart, and I'm just so glad you were honest and thanks for your vulnerability of like that, like when you actually were able to sit with the fact that it's real and you had a
yeah,
name for it, that you were able to almost describe loneliness the way that I was hearing you there in a way that maybe you'd always felt, but you didn't have a word for.
yeah,
So, like the third step, then before we get to the fourth, which is managing, which we'll just do the rest of our life because we aren't going to solve this one, is like, so as you think about accepting it, like you kind of went there a little bit, but I'm really curious of, um, it sounds like a bit of what we just said around, you kind of focus on the things you can control and you want to respond in a certain way that, you've mentioned here, but like, give us a little bit more, like, what's the process like of just accepting the fact that this is a tension and you've been feeling it for so long and it's just going to continue?
yeah. At some point, I had to stop waiting for that feeling to disappear because it wasn't
Wow.
going to.
That's good.
So, like for a long time, I believe that if I just like worked hard enough, if I got senior enough or proved myself enough, that like the feeling would go away.
Yeah. Like
And
you're now in the room and you don't feel lonely. You're
exactly,
like,
and
well,
I
no,
like feel like I belonged, and I
yeah,
wouldn't have to think about it
yeah,
anymore. But that's not how it works. The rooms didn't suddenly, fill with people who look like me or share my backgrounds as I moved up.
yeah.
The industry that I'm in, it's not going to transform overnight. Um, and I just knew I couldn't like keep feeling like that, exhausting myself, waiting for something external to change. So that's when I like had to change my relationship to it. And so
Mm,
a part of that was realizing just because I look different or grew up different doesn't mean like that I grew up wrong.
come on.
For a
That's a good.
long time, I think I unconsciously saw my background like as a deficit,
Mhm.
something I had to like compensate for, something that put me behind, and that wasn't true. But in
Wow.
my younger career, that's what I thought.
Hmm.
Um, and like, again, going back to childhood, I was watching my younger siblings and cousins from a really early age, and not because it was optional, but because that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
By the time I'm 8, 9, 10, and now when I think about it, I go, oh, I was managing schedules. I
I
was
was about to
making sure
say, here's the
everyone
positive.
ate. I was keeping the peace. I was solving problems on the fly. That's project management. That is
Come on.
leadership. That's all the things. I just didn't have a corporate word for it at the
Yeah.
time. And yeah, I didn't go to summer camp, but I spent my entire day in the summer outside, because you could only go in once to eat lunch. But after that, you were outside all day until the street lights came on. But there
Yeah.
was like no iPad and no structured like
Yeah.
activities. It was like me figuring out with other kids on the blocks. And, you made up games. And, again, when I look at that, it's like I was resolving conflict because there was no adult. That's creativity. I was problem solving still. I was really learning how to build something out of nothing. And you just learn how to look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
And those experiences taught me like how to read a room, how to adapt, how to make things stretch, how to be resourceful, how to lead without authority, how to connect with people, all those kinds of things. And so none of that happened in spite of how I grew up. It happened because of it. And
Yeah.
so I stopped seeing my story as something to, overcome. And I started seeing it as something that made me uniquely qualified.
Come on.
And honestly, a lot of the skills that make me good at my role today came because of those summers, and
Yeah.
not because of summer camp, but the way that I grew up. And so I just began to think of things and change that mindset. The other thing that I had to get honest about was, again, what part of it is my own insecurity, because it's
Yeah.
not always external. Sometimes it was, me projecting. Sometimes I was assuming people were judging when they weren't.
Yeah.
Um, and I kind of just naturally braced myself for the negative, even if it wasn't there.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, defense mechanism. Right.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's hard to admit, but it's true.
Well, I appreciate you, Minnie, because I think that um, many of us, you just think about defense mechanisms, that is the thing, whatever someone listening is going through, that's usually taking us back from a better version of ourselves
Yeah.
and from friendships and family and different things. And sometimes, to the point you made before, sometimes not. Sometimes
Yeah.
things are just things and you can't. But like, in as much as it is that you can control, try to control it, right? But
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah, I really love, because what you're talking about, like when we have guests on, and we've hit on so many different tensions, and there's thousands, frankly, of tensions. So we'll just keep running this thing as long as it's helpful to people out there with all the different tensions. But like what you actually talked about, I'm trying to think of someone that brought it up that way of like, you want to know how you, and you're kind of getting into managing it, but how do you accept it? By accepting the man, this sucks version, and the here's why it's awesome.
Hmm. You
And
got
I'm
to
like,
reframe it.
oh,
Yeah.
I just love it because I don't think anyone said that of like, you can see it, and likely when you see it, you're like, dang it. And then to your point, oh my goodness, like when you actually have to sit with this thing is going to be here forever. It's not usually the best emotion, but the whole, I accept it. Accepting it means there is a level of peace that you have with it. There
Yep.
is a level of wisdom you have. There's a level of, I will never solve it or this will be. But I just love that, like, what I'm hearing from you is, you don't get to full acceptance until you can actually truly see the positive side. So for you, you're saying, hey, everyone that looks like me, that I do feel the tension of representing, I now have a positive for you out there too, which is you also have something unique to offer that the person that you're talking to that doesn't look like you doesn't have.
Yep.
See that as the same tension of representation as much as the, yeah, it's hard, right?
Yeah.
Part of it as well. So did I capture that right?
That was spot on. And the other thing I think that shifted the mindset, and I actually got this from you, is operating more in like a both and. So,
Mm,
you know, back then it was like either I'm authentic or I'm successful. Either I name what's hard or I stay positive. Either I fit in or I stand out. But honestly, that's a trap, and it keeps you like stuck. And so, I can be strategic about how I show up, and I can bring my full self.
Yeah.
I can acknowledge the challenges, and I can still own my success. I can talk about this tension and not be defined by it. And so it's, again, it's just a big mindset shift that you have to really apply.
Yeah. Gosh, I love it. Well, I want to go to, of course, what this is all about, which is now that we know the history of it all, and you clearly are a person that knows this tension, and you have sat with it and then gone through the hardship of after sitting with it to accepting it. My goodness. So I do want to go to this last piece. Okay, you are clearly learning and have learned
Yeah.
how to manage this tension. You're
Yeah.
now, it sounds like, going and showing up into rooms, knowing, yep, this tension's here. I am representing more than Amber Allen, and I'm okay with it. I've accepted that. But here are the ways in which I am learning to manage that. You'd even mentioned some of these already, Amber, but I am curious as we go into that, like, to the listener out there that's even thinking about it. Like, I even think about in some ways like representation for me. Like, one of
Hmm.
the ones that first comes to my mind is like my faith. I know
Hmm.
that if I call myself a Christian and I'm in a room, however I'm interacting isn't just Travis Penfield. I'm
Hmm.
actually bringing a lot of the Christian faith. When I say, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm representing them. So if I go and do something
Absolutely.
totally terrible or say a bunch of things, then effectively people can say Travis is the worst, but also so is Christianity because he represents
Yep.
that. And
Yep.
so I'm trying to relate, even though I know I can't, and it's not a perfect thing to relate on versus you. It's helpful for me to even be like, I'm learning today in this. So listener out there, as she
Yeah.
goes into how do you manage it, be thinking right now, like, what is your thing in your own unique, I love what you said, Amber, be proud of your own unique background, whatever
Yep.
you look like, wherever you came from. We don't care. We
Yeah.
just want you to know it's awesome. Find the good that you just heard Amber talk
Find the
about with
good.
hers. So
Yep.
how do you manage it, Amber? How do
Yeah.
you manage this sucker?
Honestly, it's easier, but not because rooms have changed. It's because I've changed.
Come on. That's
I'm more confident now. I'm more comfortable in my own skin. Fewer insecurities about whether I belong. Very confident in my skills and what I bring to the work environment. And like I said earlier in my career, I just didn't have all that.
yeah.
Um,
Which, by
and
the way, if sorry to interrupt,
Go
if
ahead.
you're a younger listener right now listening, and maybe they're in their 20s, 30s, whatever it is, and they're just like, okay, you didn't have that. Like, how do I want to be the Amber of today. Like, what did you just quickly for the young person out there? Like, no, you didn't have it. I sure didn't.
Yeah.
But I can look back and now I do. How do you accelerate the time in which you do have it? Do you have any tips for that? Very
Oh,
practical.
absolutely. I think the biggest game changer for me was finding the right mentors,
Okay.
and um, those mentors, ironically, did not come from similar backgrounds as I did,
Yeah, they actually,
um,
they're mentors that couldn't relate and
at
yet
all.
helped.
They helped and still are mentors today,
Hmm.
who I have great relationships with. The other part of that is you have to have an honest conversation about what your insecurities are and why you have those. And
Come on.
sometimes that's a conversation that you can't really have with someone else. You really have to look in the mirror and be really honest with yourself. And sometimes that does not feel good.
Yeah.
But when you're able to have that conversation with yourself and be honest, then you can actually now figure out what needs to happen to change so that you can get past that. So,
So mentorship and extreme self-awareness are pretty
yes.
much like, do those two
Yep.
out there and whatever tension, frankly, but also even the tension of whatever you're feeling the burden of representing. It will quickly go through that to where you can manage it better. Okay, back
Yeah.
to practical how you're managing it. Sorry.
Well, and so a few things with me managing it, yeah, I still read the room. I mean, that's just
Have
smart.
to.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's smart. But I'm not performing anymore. I'm not getting into character like I
Come
used to.
on.
I'm just me. I'm myself. And that freedom feels really good. A few things that I've done is I stopped assuming the worst about people. Again, when someone asks like a called a clumsy question or awkward question, and it, lands awkwardly, I give them grace. And curiosity isn't the enemy. Um, I found my people. And like I said, some of the closest allies, they don't look like me. And so I rely a lot on a lot of friendships that I have in the workspace and with my mentors. And I give myself like the permission now to not carry everything. I'm
on.
one person with one story. I don't have to represent an entire community every time I walk
Come
into a
on.
room. It's just too much pressure. And honestly, it's not fair to me. It's not fair to anyone else. I can only speak for myself, and that is enough. That is really kind of the main things on how I manage it.
I mean, mic drop. I just kind of want to be like, we're just going to play the last minute over and over again for a different episode because, yeah, and the wisdom there, the maturity. Also, I'm sure Amber people have told you this. The level of humility and self awareness you have. Just a listener out there, that doesn't just happen. That's a
Yeah.
lot of self work. That's a lot of honesty. I love what you said before. Like probably a lot of pain. The more you get to know yourself and your own flaws and the way you do things, the more painful it is. So people don't go there. And then I love how you keep bringing up this idea of like the awkward, kind of like the awkward question. Because I
Yeah.
do think outside of even this talk, I think one of the things oh my gosh, early leader, just like, let's go take over the world. When people would ask me a question that was awkward and I was so insecure that someone was going to find out I wasn't a good leader, man, would I
Yeah.
be defensive and I come after them, I'm this, I'm that. And maybe that wasn't even what they meant. Like I didn't ask the second question, even though like, what up? And so just, for me to you out there, listeners, the more awkward sometimes the question, the more likely, like sweet and awesome that person is. Not always, that's a generalization, but like I have just learned those are actually some pretty awesome people because who's willing to ask the awkward question?
Exactly.
Right?
It takes a
Like
lot.
it's a lot. And then I think the other thing that's so funny about it is like you ask the other question. I think it's on us. If someone has the boldness to ask you that, whatever it is, then maybe ask them a question back to clarify because there's no way they said it right. And there's no way, even if the intention was good, maybe it's like, well, why are you asking? Is there something I think we owe it to them when they do that? Because it's like, thank you for taking the first and hardest step that I couldn't have
Yes.
taken for you, right? So I think that's a gold mine. Well, Amber, we're running out of time here,
Yeah.
and so as always, I end these with the same question. You've gone through your history of this. I have learned a ton, and frankly, I feel super close to you, but also I have some practical takeaways, frankly, of like how can I both help others manage this tension of representation. You've helped me with that tremendously today. Thank you. And right, like in my own places that I feel like I'm representing things, how do I manage this? So it's kind of interesting how I'm learning both sides of the equation from you today. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you get one last chance to say, hey, everybody, the tension of representation is real, and I'm managing it, and I'll never solve it. But like, what's your last bit of just advice to someone out there? It's like, yes, Amber, tell me what's my charge as I get done with this podcast.
You know, I say so the tension of representation, it's not going away. Not for me, not for you, not yet at all. But your relationship to it has to change.
Come on.
And my relationship has changed. I'm not fighting it anymore. I'm not waiting for the rooms to change. I'm just showing up as myself. And I'm managing what I can. And I'm building relationships with people who actually see me. And I think that that's the real shift. It's not about eliminating the tension. It's not about, letting it run you. And for anyone who's ever felt like they're the only one in the room, whether you're the only woman or the only Black person or the only one with a certain faith, um, I just want you to know that your presence, it does matter. It matters. I know it doesn't always feel like it. Some days you feel invisible and hyper visible all at the same time, but you being there makes a difference.
Yes.
And it does make it easier for the next person, even if you don't get a chance to see that impact. And things that make you different, those things aren't deficits, they're strengths. They're the resourcefulness, the resilience, the ability to read a room. Those things didn't happen in spite of your background, or your culture. It happened because of it. And so, own that. You don't have to shrink for to belong. And I'd say for people who want to, be better allies, just stay curious, pay attention, make these conversations normal, not heavy, not awkward, just human. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be perfect. Just be present and listen. Notice what's happening, around you, and that that's enough. And I'd say that's what I would leave you all with.
Let's go, Amber. Wow. Talk about one to listen over again, to take notes on. Amber, that was just gold after gold after gold. Thank you. What a strong, those last statements. Imagine the world if all of us did what Amber just said. My goodness, would we have a better world? And so, Amber, thanks for being on the tension. We appreciate you so much.
Thank you.